Two cries on the same day. A puppy whining under a rusted drum. A newborn elephant swaying alone beside a broken pan. No herd, no mother, only tremble. The silverback stepped into the open, chest low, one hand to ground, and chose both before the night could. He moved in wide, slow curves so nobody had to choose between fear and hope. He set a palm on the dirt beside the calf, fingers open, chest rumbling low and even, the sound that means safe. The puppy climbed onto his forearm, shook once, and pressed his ribs to the wrist, as if that was the last wall left in the world. The calf leaned toward the rumble. When knees buckled, the gorilla slid his arm like a branch under the small shoulder, so the fall became a rest. Water first. He cupped from the pan and let it drip from fur and fingers into a waiting mouth. The puppy licked the wet line on his hand and sneezed. The calf learned to swallow by copying the rhythm more than the shape. He tore a fan of leaves for shade and set the puppy against the calf's chest so their two small hearts could hold the cold away together. Rangers watched from far enough to be wind and not men. The gate stood open on a road with no permission to enter the day. Nothing in the rulebooks described this. A silverback with a dog on his arm and an elephant at his knee. So the best rule won: don't break what is mending on its own. When the sun dropped, he chose a fig whose roots were benches. He sat where a hand could touch both little bodies without lifting and let the forest talk. Crickets, a late hornbill, the pan's breath. The puppy slept with a foot over his thumb. The calf slept with its trunk over the puppy's back. Somewhere deeper, hyenas laughed at something that wasn't funny to anything that lived. Before stars took shape, the calf woke and tried the world with a wobble. The gorilla made the chest sound again, slid leaves to follow moonlight, and taught the first lesson any parent learns: how to wait without leaving. By morning, the puppy could stand without leaning. The calf could lean without falling. The three of them walked the line between forest and open like a thought becoming plan. The forest had brought him two cries. He did not send them back. And far on the ridge, a shape listened that would matter most when years had made them bigger. They were a family by noon. But could three species survive the first night? The first week found a routine because bodies insist on rhythm. The gorilla turned paths into rooms. Morning by the pan for water and mud. Midday in the fig's shade for rest. Late light along the short, secret path where the grass held the days cool. The puppy learned to be a bell, trotting a little ahead and pausing at every corner as if he had invented caution. The calf learned to put a foot where the gorilla's hand had pressed and to trust slope more than flat when the rain had been recent. Hunger taught the rest. The gorilla broke tender shoots and offered them without offering, placing them where the calf would bump into good luck. The puppy found beetles and stories only puppies hear. When the calf reached clumsy for a pool of lily, the gorilla shifted a rock with two careful pushes so the water shallowed a thumb's height and no more. When the puppy chased a dragonfly too close to the pan's slick edge, the gorilla's forearm was already blocking the slide as if the day had rehearsed it. Fear came with its own lessons. A shadow with spots waited a little too long one afternoon, thinking the puppy might forget the math of distance. The gorilla turned, made himself wider, and let his arms show the size that ends ideas. The calf did a thing no book had written, stepped up onto a low root, and made its small body tall, ears wide as it owned, trunk lifting the dog to the safe side of a branch with awkward grace. The spotted thing lost interest in problems that could solve themselves. There were mornings the puppy wouldn't move until someone touched him, as if sleep had left him deep in an old cold. There were afternoons the calf refused to lie down, because standing felt like not being alone. On those hours the gorilla became a shelf, one palm under a jaw, another across a shoulder, the weight of his certainty flattening the tremor in smaller bones. Rangers left a steel bowl at the fig tree, tucked where rain would find it but monkeys wouldn't. No noise, no scent beyond metal and clean. The puppy stared at it the first day and refused. The second day he pushed it closer to the gorilla's foot and wagged his tail so hard that the bowl made its own weather. By the third, the bowl was part of their map, and nobody remembered who had placed it there first. Seasons turned. The calf's steps lost the wobble and found the same beat the gorilla had always carried. The puppy grew into the same tail with more certainty in it. They discovered places the sun keeps for itself. A salt lick, where the earth tasted like thunder. a hollow where termites farmed air, a fallen jacaranda that made the perfect bridge when the small stream woke after the first real rain. Under the fig, the gorilla taught a sound, not a call, not a word, a thread of chest that means stay near without stopping. The puppy learned to hum it as a whistle without air. The calf learned to hold it in his trunk like a note that didn't have to be loud to be true. They could find each other in mist with that and never have to shout. By the year's end, the calf could move a small log on purpose. The puppy had found courage that knew its own size, and the gorilla, who had once been only his own weight in the world, now measured days by 3 breaths instead of 1. They had a rhythm. But could that rhythm hold when growth changes the edges of every body? Time did what time always does. It stretched them into their future. The puppy broadened, chest like a drum, muzzle scarred from the kind of curiosity that leaves a mark. The calf drifted upward until his shoulders met the bottom leaves that had once been sky. Tusks budded like commas waiting for the right sentence. The gorilla's back silvered wide as a river under late light. His hands held memory even when they only held dirt. Every spring brought a lesson in water. Droughts in that place write warnings with dust before they write them with fire. The calf learned to dig shallow pans where dark soil holds old rain. The puppy learned the smell of wet iron and would trot ahead, then turn and call with his whole body when the shovel of a trunk came down exactly where it should. The gorilla learned to stand guard while the earth drank and returned enough for the 3 of them. They began to keep appointments with the day. At noon, always the fig. At dusk, the salt place. If storms gathered, the low path by the rock with the lizard heat still in it. Rangers learned those appointments too, from a distance. Sometimes a bowl of water sat waiting at fig shade. Sometimes a crate of Hessian sacks near the pan, covered against weather. The way a thank you doesn't need a letter when it has hands. One afternoon brought bees, the kind that arrive as a shape and not a number. The puppy barked once and tucked himself into the gorilla's side. The calf, now not so small, turned his body so that his ears could fight wind, and his trunk could lay a path through the swarm. He fanned air the way an elder would for a child who can't catch a breath. The bees changed their mind about the day. The gorilla held the puppy under his chest until the sound thinned to something the forest could manage. When the calf scraped a knee on rock, the puppy washed the hurt with the careful tongue dogs use on their own paws. The gorilla pressed a chewed wad of leaves against the bleeding and waited beside the pain until it decided to leave. Every body learned more than it was born with. By their 5th year, other elephants began to watch the calf, then to follow him when choices mattered. He circled from the gorilla's fig to their dust, back to the pan, as if one path could hold 2 worlds without argument. The puppy became a rumor among rangers' boots, the dog that knows the gate code without ever reading numbers. The gorilla stood taller in ways that had nothing to do with inches. On the morning that marked 7 winters, thunder lived in heat instead of sky. The forest fell quiet. Something old and fast had decided to wake. The puppy stood up before the ground was done with its thought. The calf tested the air as if another map had been hung over the one they owned. The gorilla touched the fig's root with the back of his hand and left it there a second longer than he needed. They had built a life out of small rescues and bigger patience. The forest was about to ask for all of it at once. They could find water, but could they find a way through what was coming next? The fire that started on the far ridge was not loud at first. It whispered through grass, tasted bark, took small, narrow breaths and pretended it would tire. Wind convinced it to try a little harder. By noon, even the dust tasted hot. By 1, leaves had sound where they were not moving. By 2, flame ran in a line so straight it looked like thinking. Rangers drew their map on the fly. Clear the old road. Cut a break where the land would help. Steer the thing toward already burned ground. The puppy ran to the gate by instinct and refused to leave until someone moved. When Boots did, he turned and led them along the service road that the trio had made a habit. The sign the rangers needed was the only one that mattered. Fresh prints, 3 sizes, cutting downhill toward the fig. The gorilla kept the puppy inside his shadow and the elephant between his troop and the line of bright heat. The calf, now taller than most bulls, though time had not yet written the full story on his head, watched the way flame took the low and left the high. He looked at the road where trucks would come and at the choked place where fallen limbs made the world hesitate. He made a choice only memory could teach. He knelt. He knelt first to let the gorilla climb the broken place none of his troop could cross. The old male put a hand to shoulder, then to spine, then stood on the other side with the kind of grace you only see when two very different bodies agree. He knelt again to push with his chest where a tree slowed the path. Trunks behind him helped, younger shoulders learning the physics of help without explanations. He knelt a third time beside a narrow ditch where smoke lived thicker than air. The puppy crossed his back to guide the way down to the clean line the rangers were cutting. Flame changed its mind when it met dirt that had already been chosen. It looked for the easy run and found none. The road held. The brake held. Thunderhead, borrowed from the ocean, arrived late, but arrived all the same. Rain came in fists first, then fingers. Smoke turned back into air. In the stunned, wet quiet, the rangers reached the bend and saw it. A silverback lifted high on the shoulder of a grown elephant, a dog standing on a living bridge of muscle, and behind them a troop that did not panic, because the three who knew each other best refused to. A ranger's hand went to his radio, and then didn't. There was nothing to order. The orders had been written by years. When the last orange thread burned to black wire, and then to nothing, the trio stood on the clean side of the world, watching the dirty side remember how to breathe. Somewhere upwind, a hornbill decided it had opinions about the rain, and shared them. The puppy shook and made the usual small weather. The gorilla put his palm on the elephant's shoulder, just once. The map had changed. The bond had not. They had outrun fire together. 10 years had made them strong. But what would they choose to do with that strength when there was no emergency to solve? At dawn, a thin ribbon of water traced the dust from the pan to the yard. It ended at the steel bowl under the fig, full, without rain, no hoses, only round prints and the splash marks of a trunk that remembered a small dog and a long thirst. The first shock was how deliberate it looked. The second was that it wasn't just once. Every morning for a week, the bowl filled by way of a matriarch who had once been a calf under a stranger's shade. The dog, old now, walked slow, then faster, then ran the last 4 steps like something young remembered how. He drank, and then stood back, not to give thanks. Dogs don't do that, but to stand present for a kindness he knew. At dusk, the silverback came to the fig with the patience of a king who knows ceremony is a tool, not a coat. He sat as in the first week, palms down, nothing in his hands and everything inside them. The elephant stepped within a distance that belongs to family and set her trunk across his chest with the weight of a promise. Behind her, a calf copied the angle badly and got it right enough to be sweet. The dog leaned against the gorilla's shin and closed his eyes like a small prayer that had learned to be a nap. The year's late rains failed. Pans shrank to mirrors smaller than memory. The matriarch walked between 2 worlds, forest and open, and chose a third. She brought her herd to the fig at noon and stayed. They dug not for themselves, but inside the yard, where the ground tilted to a low place the rangers had always meant to widen and never had. The first water rose brown, the second honest. The gorilla's troop arrived without discussion. They drank by turns, because turns had been taught to them by hunger and by love. The rangers stood at the fence and lowered their hands, the sign for we understand what is happening and know to stay out of it. What shocks a person who thinks they've seen everything is not the size of an elephant or the politics of a troop. It is deliberate mercy. 10 years had turned a rescue into a culture, a way the forest remembered a promise and kept paying it forward without keeping score. When wind returned with seeds in it, the trio did what they always did at the end of a crisis. They walked down the short, secret path, across the jacaranda that is still the perfect bridge, past the salt that tastes like storms, up to the fig that made their first room. The dog stepped onto the gorilla's hand for the small lift even though he didn't need it. The elephant waited the extra breath for the dog to land because she liked that she could. Night found them where morning always does when there is nothing to fix. Together, within reach. The matriarch set her trunk down once more where a silverback carries its river. The dog set his paw on a palm he had known since paws were too small to name. The gorilla looked at the bowl, and the trench, and the tracks, and the sky, and then at nothing at all, the way you look when your whole body trusts the room it is in. If this gave you a minute of steady ground, tell us your city. Tell us which image stayed. A dog on a forearm, a trunk pouring a bowl, a silver hand on a shoulder, or the quiet, wide fact of three hearts choosing the same map. And if someone you love needs proof that kindness can scale, share this, then go pour someone's bowl before the day gets hot.